Hello, this is Mike. Welcome to a new episode of Urban Legends and Mythologies. And yes, that is correct. I have decided to rename the show. However, it will remain the same show with the same format and all that fun stuff. But without any further ado, let's get into our topic for today. So, I'm going to tell you a story about the time I went to Florida. And this wasn't like the nice part of Florida with like the old retirement communities and like Boca Raton and Disney World and, all the nice beaches and cruise ships and stuff. This was like the swampy old panhandle of Florida with like alligators and like boa constrictors and swamps and like 900,000 degree heat and creepy rednecks running around the swamps. And everywhere you turned around, there was something there trying to eat you, sting you, bite you, etc., etc. So the reason we were down there was they were putting in a new gas pipeline, a natural gas pipeline. And a lot of times when you do that, you have to do an environmental impact study. And if you're going through a site with cultural history, you usually have to have an archaeological survey go ahead. And once that concludes, you can usually put the pipeline in. So we're out in the swampy middle of nowhere, and since it's such a long drive to get to the nearest motel, we just decided that we were just going to camp on site. We didn't want to have to trudge through swamps, and despite our previous understandings that these swamps were filled with airboats, there was no airboat rental place within like 50 miles of us, which was a big disappointment. So we do our work for the day. It's later that evening. We're sitting around the camp. We're dealing with our field notes. We're sitting around drinking beer, drinking delicious Rheingeist Truth India Pale Ale from Cincinnati, which I had in a giant cooler that I took down with me. And we're just carrying on, having a good time like you do when you're out camping, even if you are in a manky old swamp filled with gators and whatever gators eat, which is basically everything. So it's a pretty uneventful night, and as the night wears on, we start to retire to our tents, when all of a sudden we hear this howling out in the middle of the swamp, and we don't know what it is. We're like, that's too deep. It doesn't sound like a coyote. It almost sounds like an ape. But there are no apes around, there are no zoos around, so this is weird. So we hear this clamoring around, and these footsteps are getting closer, and there's this horrible smell. It smells like an old IPA that's been spilled and nobody's cleaned up after a few days. It's got this real skunk smell to it. And at that point, we hear this big crash right in the middle of the campsite, right near where the beer cooler is. And we're hearing stuff going crazy. There's beer cans flying. It's hitting the tents. We unzip our tent, and what we see in front of us scares the living daylights out of us. Because in front of us, we see a big Sasquatch-looking, giant, like 8-foot tall, hairy dude. And he's in our cooler, he's stealing our beer, and he's trashing our campsite. Now, first, with my background in the punk rock culture, I thought this was just some like wook who got a hold of like some bad drugs and was having a trip. But this dude was huge and he wasn't vocal. He takes one look at us and his eyes are just glowing. He hoots and hollers and he just takes off into the swamp with our cooler full of beer. It is a very, very sad sight to see that cooler full of delicious Rheingeist Truth just disappear into the woods. And we're all trying to collect ourselves, and we don't know what's going on. But that's when it suddenly hits us. We're in Florida, land of the skunk ape, which is the topic of this episode today. Yes, it's finally getting around to it. American Cryptids is now going to be like all about Sasquatch and the skunk ape and Bigfoot and all the variants around the world. It's finally here. I'm finally doing the much requested, air quotes, Bigfoot episodes. So what is the skunk ape? What is his origins? Where did he come from? And why did he steal my beer in that story that I just made up? So like everything, let's start at the beginning. The skunk ape is a cryptid ape-like creature alleged to inhabit forests and swamps in the southeastern United States, most notably in Florida. However, there are variants in Georgia, Alabama, places that are kind of close to the panhandle as well. Mississippi. a little bit. The creature is commonly referred to as the Florida Bigfoot, and it's often compared to its cousin, the general rest of America and part of Canada Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever variant you want to call it. It's from the same cryptozoological ape man family. A lot of people think that it's just some kind of offshoot or variant of that. Bigfoot is in every single culture that you can think of, that has like this man beast ape kind of idea. It's commonly described as a bipedal ape-like creature about 1.5 to 2.1 meters tall, so topping out around 7-8 feet, and covered in reddish brown hair. It's reported to be similar in stature to Bigfoot. However, its main characteristic is it produces this foul skunk-like odor, which, it's almost like I said earlier, an old IPA that's just been left out for like 3 days in a punk rock house, that like old skunk smell. Yeah, it kind of radiates a odor like that. So according to the history, the skunk ape has been recorded as appearing in Florida, Georgia, and in Alabama folklore since European settlers first occupied the region. Even in 1818, a local newspaper reported a story that spoke of a man-sized monkey raiding food stores and stalking fishermen along the shore. Now, it makes sense that European settlers in the area would have picked up these stories. They would have picked them up from, like, the Seminoles that were living down there at the time. Because even in their culture, they have stories of a foul-smelling, physically powerful, and secretive creature called the Esti Kapkaki. If I said that name right, I have no idea. A name which roughly translates to furry tall man or hairy giant. So naturally, if that was the cultural significance in Seminole culture, then these people who would come in and interact with these Seminoles, they would have picked up this story from them, which, brings us to the current folklore of today. So in a way, it's just preserving that old folklore. However, in Native American culture, especially in North America, those Bigfoot myths, they're kind of pretty much everywhere you go, from as far north as, the Inuit in, like, upper Canada, all the way into, like, even Florida. And of course, since then, there have been numerous sightings. There was a sighting in 1929. There was another one in 1942 where a guy in Shawnee County reported a similar creature to the skunk ape rushing out of the brush line while he's driving down an isolated road, and it grabbed onto his vehicle, jumped up on the running board, and was beating on his door for like half a mile before he finally took off into the woods. In Putnam County, Florida, in the 40s, there were a number of alleged sightings of that creature that came to be known as the Barden Booger. In the 60s, a rash of sightings in central Florida happened. One report in 1963 involved several members of a family encountering an ape-like creature around their rural home. Even at one instance, it actually peeked in through the window at night. So imagine you get up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom or something. You're sitting there on the throne and you look over and there's this skunk ape just watching you go. Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't traumatic. In the 70s, there were some sightings by some Palm Beach County sheriff deputies who actually fired at the thing. From 71 to 75, a bunch of sightings occurred in Broward County and the surrounding areas. Multiple eyewitnesses reported nocturnal encounters with this giant ape, or several of these giant apes. We got to remember, if there is this Bigfoot, Sasquatch population, yeah, it's going to have variants and offshoots and whatever. And the climate they're in is going to really affect their morphology. So, there's probably this breeding group in the southeastern part of the country that's, 7 feet tall, reddish hair, blah, 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 which would suggest a healthy breeding population. And even since the 70s, there had been numerous sightings. Farmers allege that they come onto their farms and harass their cattle and stuff. It even got to the point where a bill was actually proposed in the Florida legislature in 1977 to make it illegal to take, possess, harm, or molest arthropods or humanoid animals, because these sightings are prevalent and it gets into the mindset of the people, of the community. And that's how general folklore goes, and it can even affect local and even state laws. And even up to today, there are sightings all over Florida. It's said that 48 out of the 67 counties in Florida have reported some kind of sighting of this creature since 2010. Now, I know what a lot of people are probably thinking. They're probably thinking, well, it's Florida. Have you ever met Florida Man? Florida Man is last in education and first in crystal meth use. Can we really trust what Florida Man's saying that he's seeing out there in the swamps? And other people say, well, maybe these people are just seeing and misidentifying bears. Well, if they are seeing and misidentifying black bears, that's over 200 years of misidentifying black bears. I think at some point, you're just gonna call a bear, and something that mildly resembles a bear or a human that you can't quite understand, something else. But if anything, the skunk ape has had a positive impact on Florida's kind of their natural resources, natural wildlife, rural culture. It's become kind of the unofficial mascot of these very delicate ecosystems, what the wildlife department tries to keep as pristine as possible. It's kind of like how you have all these other mascots for these other organizations. And, the skunk ape, he actually, he appears on roadside attractions, on commercials, on business signs. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, a Florida business used the skunk ape's reported foul smell to promote social distancing. So, it's kind of made that leap from this old Seminole legend to local folklore to marketing opportunities, which kind of reflects the jackalope in a similar way. And I mean, if it wasn't some kind of cultural significance associated with the skunk ape, I wouldn't be getting drunk off of this Rheingeist truth and talking about it today. So that's basically the gist of the skunk ape. He's a Bigfoot variant that's most prevalent in Florida, and he is just another one of these cryptozoological creatures that is found throughout most of North America, which, you could suggest that if there is this healthy breeding group of this species in the United States, it would naturally have some offshoots, some variants. So, blah, blah, blah. Kind of just like how humans, we don't really have offshoots and variants now, but in the past, mostly the pre-Stone Age past, we had other offshoots and variants, such as the Neanderthal, the Homo habilis, Homo erectus, etc., etc., etc. And there's a lot of overlap in that, where we were kind of somewhat isolated. However, we would come amongst them and interact with them every once in a while. So it's kind of the same idea. They may be out there, but they're so isolated that we only come across them every once in a while, which sounds insane, considering we have 8 billion people on this planet. We've mapped every square inch of it, it seems like. But there's still those dark regions that we've never really gotten to. We can see them on a map, we can see them on GPS, but we've never actually been there. So who knows? There could be thousands, if not millions, of these creatures out there. Now, that is, my scientific mind is screaming, no, you need some kind of evidence of that. You need fossil evidence. We've been everywhere. We've seen them. They've been picking through our trash cans and stealing our beer. But, stranger things have happened. It's like I said in the Nessie video, 3/4 of our planet, we have no idea what's under it, because while we know a lot, there's still those mysteries of the deep. And that's what really keeps our folklore alive and progressing, which I think is awesome. I think that, it's amazing that we live on this planet and there's still so much mystery out there to capture, and there are these myths, and these myths become, they get handed down throughout the generations and they preserve a little something of our past. But on that note, I am kind of rambling now, so I'm going to end this here. I thank you for listening. This is Urban Legends and Mythologies, new title. I even got a new logo. I'm also going to be printing up some like business cards and stickers because I'm going to this like gaming event in November, and my favorite band Psycho Stick's going to be there, which is like the main reason I'm going. And I'm going to be handing out those business cards and those stickers to like literally everybody I meet. So if you're interested in that, that's in November. I'll probably talk more about it later, or I'll rant about it on Facebook or something. But if you do like what I'm doing, all I ask is that you do I always say, tell a friend, give it a listen. You know, this podcast grows mostly by word of mouth, and I do appreciate any kind of growth on that front. And with that being said, I actually have another episode I have to record for Tuesday because I'm lazy and I lag behind on stuff. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode, which I'm going to record like in 2 minutes.